What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Master Crafted, and we are here with our first ever tier list, and we are so excited to dive right in and give you some of our hot takes. We are going to be running through all the factions, post-data slate, and kind of just giving you a quick insight as to why we think they are where they're at. And just as a disclaimer, this is not on which factions are like the best of the best and just absolute worst. It is all from the perspective of which of these are going to be the factions that are most likely to go X and O at a tournament, or at least X and 1, and which factions we think are going to struggle with it the most. And it is all through that lens that we are going to be diving into this today. Phil, what are some of the things that are some of the hot takes that maybe you want to hint at for now?
I just want to start off with pointing out that we spent a lot of time coming up with the names for these, and I am incredibly proud of them. So our ranking system is number 1, Mastercrafted, obviously. Harkens to the channel. We love it. Next one is Blessed by the Omnissiah, and then Touched by a Tech Priest, Big Mechs Gubbins, then Hive World Scrap, and then all the way at the bottom is Warp Tainted Junk. So we are separating these things out, and I will say, looking at it from a perspective of like what's going to go X and O, we are saying that this is the same skill level player at a tournament. What capabilities does this player have? And then taking it forward, because I would say there's a lot of things that are going to be in here that are going to surprise you about armies that you're like, well, there's no way. I've never seen them at a top table or anything like that. I would strongly say that there is so much data out there for 40K. And there are armies and players that can play an army. Even if it's just one time, they consistently go 5-1, 6-0. I think Scari's a perfect example. Him and a couple other guys like Cody and Nick sit at that top of the 5-1, 6-0 for Dark Eldar. But then almost everyone else is like struggling to get 3-3. They're going 2-4. So if we look at it from that lens, there is a lot of factions that might be higher up than you would expect, because they have great tools and a high skill expression, but not everyone is able to attain those.
Yeah, I think that is a very great description of what we are trying to show with this tier list and how we are really trying to, I guess, get a grasp on the meta and what we think is really going to rise to the top, and what things we are going to see probably not get a ton of tournament wins. And even if it is, in Warp Tainted Junk, that does not mean you cannot do it. We just think it's going to be a lot harder to do so in the current meta, because there are some meta menaces, as Phil likes to say, that are running wild after this update. We are going to also let everybody know that John has agreed to officially start, helping out with the channel a little more, and he is going to be coming back frequently. So we are very excited to have John. And John, what are maybe some of the things you are the most happy about? We've talked about Tau specifically with you. What are some other things from the data slate that you were psyched to see?
Yeah, so I think bringing the top dogs down really helped a lot. So like one faction in particular that I was really happy to see get blasted into the abyss was Slanesh Demons, because they are an existential crisis to Tau. In addition, I was getting a little annoyed of a bunch of T3 guys with plasma guns and melta-guns blowing me off the face of the planet. So the touch to Bridgehead was necessary and very appreciated from top players, let's say. Yeah, very happy to be here and really excited to be on the channel, discuss with you guys a couple of their high-level players, how the meta's shaping out. I think it'll be a really cool tier list, so I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome. All right, well, we will dive right in. First up, we're just going to work our way through them as they are on the bottom. Thousand Suns. All right, Phil, where are we going to start Thousand Suns at on this tier list?
Well, unfortunately, I think Thousand Suns are paying for their sins a little bit. There was a time in the meta where they dominated. They were ran by guys like Liam VSL, who I put a lot of faith in. If I see him put an army on the board, one, I know it's a high skill expression army. I know it has the tools to win major GTs, and I know consistently he will continue to do so. Thousand Suns can still do that. Is it probably one of the hardest to do it with, because they've taken a little bit of punishment and they don't necessarily have the breadth of units to pick from? Absolutely. I still think they're okay. I still think they have some tools. I don't know if I'd put them in Warp Tainted Junk. I definitely think they're in the Hive World Scrap. They are definitely very difficult to maneuver, especially in this current meta of Ironstorm and Deathwatch and these new orcs or even tactical orcs, like they can just get shot off the board and it can be very, very difficult. So I don't know if I'd put them all the way at the bottom, but they are definitely not in a great place right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. John, anything you'd like to add on those T Suns?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like you'll notice as we get through the tier list that one theme of the armies that end up in the bottom, and the reason why I think we're going to put them here near Hive World Scrap, I think is a good spot. It's because you're not seeing a lot of the faction experts stay with the army, right? Not a ton of people are playing T Suns, and a lot of those high level players that you mentioned are now gravitating away from it because because the army has difficulty into a lot of the current skews within the meta, and just again, you've probably heard it from listening to other videos, is at the end of the day a bunch of Space Marine bodies. So although it can be kind of tricky to play if you haven't played it recently, at the end of the day, they just don't have enough units to really play the game of 40k super effectively today.
Yeah, I think that is 100% fair. I think we are all just fine with T Suns being some Hive World Scrap. They are nothing but dust-filled, Space Marine suits anyway. They're not doing anything special right now in the meta. Still can do it. It's just going to take a lot of skill. Moving on, we have Adeptus Mechanicus, one of the factions that did not really receive much love in the data slate, and we felt that it definitely could have. It started off pretty low on our initial tier list and has not really moved up. Phil, where are we placing that?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Omnissiah is not blessed AdMech. I think this is pretty straightforward. They are not durable. They don't have the tools. They're not aggressive enough. Now, I do like their Grotmist detachment, and I think if their units had a little bit better rules, I don't think they need any more points drops. They are already so dirt cheap. They are outclassed in pretty much every sense of the game. They don't shoot as well as majority of other armies. They don't sticky as well. They're not as mobile, and they kind of just fall apart because they're even worse than Space Marines. So if you're gonna run an army, you're probably running Vanguard, Skitarii Vanguard, just because you're just trying to OC out objectives. And there are a lot of armies that have the offensive capacity to just pick up full units of Skitarii, and it is not good. So for me, they're in warp tainted junk. They need help. They need rules changes. They don't need points. They have the detachments that can do it. It's just the units themselves are really, really behind the 8-ball.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. John, if you have any comments on AdMech?
Yeah, I think to Phil's point, like I think in the past when there were a lot of durability skews in the meta, they were actually a pretty good counter to that, just because of the amount of bodies that they had. There wasn't a lot of volume of fire in the meta, but to Phil's point, now that there are a lot of good Overwatches out there, a lot of people are teching for Eldar. Like, things that kill Eldar also happen to kill a lot of T3 bodies as well. So I agree. I think as far as the single army is concerned, I think it is unfortunately warp tainted.
Yep, I agree, and we're going to keep it moving right on to the next one, which I think is going to be hanging out right next to it. Imperial agents just still aren't a full army. I don't think we're going to have to spend an exorbitant amount of time on this. They just don't do it. They don't do the thing. They don't have enough units that really can just play the game correctly. They have a smattering of odd rules, and you should just smatter them into your own other army and play something else.
GW hasn't really given, a lot of reasons to run Imperial agents, right? Like, they haven't made any cool rule sets to kind of attract new players to the faction. And at the end of the day, like, the core of the tier list is how many tournaments are players going to win with this, and I guarantee you it's not going to be very many. That's for sure.
Yes, and the insanely low player count does not help.
No, it does not.
Moving along, we are going to go up to Black Templars. Phil, gonna be moving up at least a little bit from Warp Tainted Junk here, or are they hanging out down at the bottom too?
They're still Space Marines, right? They have Oath, they have tools. Hellbrick is still a monster, right? Like, Crusader squads, are they expensive? Yes. But they're still Space Marines at the end of the day, and they take advantage of a lot of good data sheets that are in Space Marines. I think they're still going to struggle, right? I'm actually glad to kind of see them gone, because when we went on Champs Cup, I saw the black tide of just like huge bricks of 20-man Crusader squads that were just like, okay, well, you can't chew through whatever it was, 4 of them or 3 of them. and you just have to punch through them, and Grimaldus and Halbrecht, and it did not look fun to play against. I was happy that my Orc teammate took care of it, and it was just like wave on wave crashing into each other. It looked miserable, but they dealt with it, not me. So that was I do think it's better than AdMech and Imperial Agents. I just think it's just Space Marine bodies, so it does stand a chance, but I definitely don't put it above Thousand Suns. I don't think it has the tools to even get out of Warp Tainted Junk until we see something substantial with data sheets or maybe points drops. But
yeah, I think that is fair. Yep. Yeah, I think that is totally fair. John, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one thing you'll notice with other Marine chapters is they just have access to better data sheets, which makes Black Templars obsolete, right? Like Blood Angels have better detachments, Ultramarines have better data sheets in Calgar and Ultramarines. There's just not really a compelling reason to play Black Templars unless you are, a Black Templars aficionado, right? That's your only Space Marine faction you play. I think that's the biggest thing that's going to hold them back from seeing a lot of high-end tournament finishes.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We have talked enough about those who are going to struggle. Let's talk about somebody who is going to do pretty well, and that is Blood Angels. And you don't even have to run them with the Bloodless Angels prototype because that's no longer on the table. But where are we putting them? They are not at the bottom, and we know that for sure.
yeah, I mean, Sandguard are good. Rageful Warrior's good. They have a great detachment. They have tools. They have the tools that they need to do. I've seen plenty of 3-man bricks of Sandguard be incredibly tough. I think the character detachment for Space Marines is really interesting, and it does provide a lot. When I went to LVO watching John Lennon's list, I really appreciated that because it just showed like just how inventive you can be with Space Marines and some of these detachments and some of these units. So I think they're up there. The problem is with Bloodless Angels being gone, they are probably the next best option for Space Marines that isn't Ultramarines. Like, if you're not going to run Ultramarines, they are probably the next best. But are they better than most? I would have a hard time. I would say maybe top of Touched by Tech Priests, bottom of Blessed by the Messiah. They're probably right in that window of like, they got tools. They are good. They can go 5-1. I think they could very, very reasonably go 6-0. It does take a skilled pilot to do so. You do have a good player base that can support it. I do think you're going to see more of those because they have a lot of great tools. But yeah, I would put them up there. It's either bottom of Blessed by the Messiah or top of Touched by a Tech Priest.
All right. Well, maybe John can decide that issue himself and maybe give us a reason why he would lean one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say. I will say that, one thing, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine that, Blood Angels has a decent matchup into Eldar these days, especially like Yunari, for example, just because they don't, a lot of times I would say, in, what is it called? Not Angelic Inheritors, the old Index detachment, the amount of small units that you can run that move 12 inches, right? Like the JPIs, the Staying Guard of the world, that move 12, have access to advanced and charge. They can stage pretty effectively into Eldar and then crash into their lines and say, okay, I'm not going to shoot any of my guns. You're not going to get this cute little move. And any unit in that Blood Angel army will be able to punch up and kill an Eldar unit. So I think just thinking about that matchup specifically has to put them at least, I would say, at the top of Touched by a Tech Priest. But maybe we can finagle them a little bit around depending on where the top of the meta kind of settles here in the tier list.
Awesome. Yeah, we will take a look back when we get towards the end, and that'll be one we have definitely marked to take a second look at, depending on where we felt like everything else has landed. Moving along, we have Chaos Knights. Just some War Dog spam. Has that really gotten any better or worse, or has it mostly stayed the same?
Feels the same. It's done the same thing. You know exactly what it's gonna do. It's carnivores, it's brigands, it's get up in your face, it's a skew list. Will it win tournaments? Yes, absolutely. It's probably gonna run through some people, especially that 5-1. I think that's very doable for them because it's just good. It just does the things that it's asked to do, and War Dog spam is a real thing.
Yeah, and I would say like it's getting, the meta is getting more skewy. I would say like balance lists don't, I would say, typically do well now, in my experience. So it's like the Horde style versus the, toughness skew, right? and they kind of slot in where they can kind of deal pretty well with the horde side of things, but also themselves are asking you the question, like, can you handle 10 or 12 T10 bodies with 5 up invulns? Yeah, curious what you think about that lane.
I mean, I think I would definitely put them in Touched by a Tech Priest. I think they are very strong. I think it is, a lot of those matchups that we were talking about, Eldar having all of the indirect that they do, being able to also, they have great sweep profiles, they have great anti-tank profiles. If we're seeing a meta that's going to have very skewy lists, those carnivores are going to be able to deal with either pretty well. And their shooting will deal with chaff very well as well. I think they still run into some speed bumps on things that can deal with them and slow them down, but I think they definitely at least have a decent chance to do it with a good pilot.
Are they above Blood Angels or below them?
I don't see them moving up, so I think they just have to stay below, because if Blood Angels could make the jump, inherently they are below.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I just envision Blood Angels having better ability to win GTs than Chaos Knights in my professional opinion, just because, to your point, Lane, I think that there are some speed bumps in the meta. Even though the Eldar can kind of be a tough matchup for them, they could also just have a bunch of Dark Reapers and 15 melt the guys and make it a tough day's work. So
Those fire dragons are scary for sure.
Yeah. All right, moving along. Up next, we do have the Chaos Space Marines. Unfortunately, the new detachment is Chaos Demons, so we can't technically say that is where they are seeing the play. People are going to be whipping those models out to use them, but that does not count for this. We are talking just more Creations of Bile, I think is going to be still one of the mainstays for CSM. Where is this going to land on the tier list?
Yeah, this is probably best blessed by the Omnissiah. It is really good. We just talked about skews and just how successful those can be, especially if you get the right run, because people, for those that may be going to their first tournament, it really matters, right? Like, you taking a skew list or just a list, if you just go up into a hard counter, your tournament could be over. Like, you're 4-0 on the day or on the weekend, and then you go into the one thing that you really can't see, and it can be very, very tough, and you'll catch something. Now, that is Chaos Space Marines. Like, if you can't deal with bricks of Possessed and Chosen that are potentially toughness 6, toughness 7, right? Like, how do you manage that in a game? And it could be really, really tough with the amount of pressure they could put out with Advance and Charge and all that stuff. So they're definitely blessed by the Omnissiah for me. They could definitely win a tournament. I've seen plenty. But they probably don't as consistently as those lists that we're going to put in Mastercrafted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Lane.
Oh, all you, man. I was throwing it to you anyway.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I think, I would tend to agree. I think Possessed right now is really strong. It's one of those other skews like Phil was talking about. Just by the nature of CSM having so many different builds, available to them throughout, a given meta, they pretty much always bounce around between those two different spots. And I think Possessed is a really strong skew in today's meta.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing you just said. Different type of skew than the Knights, but it handles everything else much more effectively and consistently while being a skew itself. Blessed by the Omnissiah, right where it needs to go. We'll keep it on moving. Going into Adeptus Custodes, the first one of the day that I know for a fact Phil is throwing in Mastercrafted. Not a second thought about it. It's getting slammed right in there. And we have a whole video telling you why. Phil, let's give them a brief rundown. This is your area expertise. Why are they going in Mastercrafted?
Access to +1 to wound for an army that already hits on 2s is going to be really good. It's just the way it's going to work. Unfortunately, it's going to make it very hard. You also have access to fallback and charge. You also have access to what I would say is the best suite of enhancements I have ever seen for an army. Those are 4 enhancements that I would be happy taking. Like, I would take all 4 if they let me, because they're just that good. You have data sheets that are incredible. You still have access to katas. You are a threat in combat, even with your little battle line units. Your Witch Seekers or whatever got better. And you already have great anti-tank in Calidus. Like, it is going to be, when I say Meta Menace, I am very, very confident that it's up there. But I do think it is a step behind the other 2 that I consider to be in front of them. So it does have tools. It does have some really great scoring capabilities, I think, which is something Custodes has kind of struggled with. but now it is going to be very scary for a lot of people. So I definitely think it's up there.
Yeah, John, anything to add?
I'm actually going to have to plead the fifth on this one and trust Phil's judgment, because I haven't taken a deep dive into the detachment, but from what Phil just shared, I'm certainly going to have to start teching into bike captains and T7 7 wound Terminator captains who stand back up on a 2-up with full wounds. Not looking forward to that.
Yeah, they are going to be a pain. Using a lot of those once per battle abilities twice is vastly going to change how well this army performs. And again, going in and just, I feel like it's already been a theme throughout this video so far. Things that are kind of skewy. 2-up, 4-up in a skew in a meta that's really trying to deal with more MSUE type things is also going to play very well into what a lot of people are teching for. All right, up next, another one of the new detachments. We got Chaos Demons. I feel like they're going to be pretty strong. Let's throw it to John first. Where do you feel like these are going to go?
Man, put me on the spot.
Yeah.
So I'm 2 for 2 now. I also have not looked at this detachment. Nice, birthday. I also have not looked at this detachment. From what I know about it, right, I've heard Khorne getting advanced charge. I know that Be'lakor got a huge lift. Yeah, so I would, defer to your guys' professional opinion. But from all the people's opinions that I respect, they say that this is a strong detachment. But I'm curious, Phil, like if you could, and or Lane, if you could fill in as to just, why that is.
Yeah, so the thing that stands out the most, and there's a combination that once I saw the enhancement, I was like, that seems really good. So they can take an enhancement that after the owner of the enhancement kills a unit, they can immediately go back into Deep Strike as long as they're not within engagement range. And the first thing that came to my mind, and when we talked about it with Nick, is if I put that on a Bloodthirster, I rapid ingress it, it moves, it has fly, it goes murders whatever it wants to murder. It doesn't matter. Like, a Bloodthirster will kill anything, and it does mortals. So it's like, after you kill it, and then you go back at a Deep Strike. So that is an uninteractable Bloodthirster if the player is playing it properly, right? Like, I don't want to get heroic into, I don't want to get bogged down. Like, I just want to be able to...
question.
Go ahead.
Oh, shoot. I lost audio on you for a second. But I just have one question, which is, can you, stop it in any way? Is it interactable? Is it just, strictly...
you better have some things
heroic?
that can heroic, and that is
Okay,
it.
so if he's out of engagement range. Okay, so there is some push.
Yeah.
Yes.
But still, that is gross. And I know the Blipper, right? You got a movement buff as well.
Yeah, I am going to, as a guard player, there's multiple reasons I'm actually thinking about going back up to 12 Bulgrin, as much as I have actually been enjoying the trash I have. There's just so many things in the top of the meta where I'm like, I need that for heroics. I need to be able to handle orcs and give them tough things to chew on and shit like that. Yeah, I think Chaos Demons, the new detachment, is going to have a lot of different ways to play it. And I think a lot of those different ways are all going to be good. You can also lean into the -1 to hit the Tzeentch targets and -1 to wound the Nurgle targets and just swamp the board with a bunch of tough bodies and say, try to win the primary game, because you're going to have to chew through me to do it, and it's not going to go well.
Yikes. That sounds pretty gross. Lane, where do you think this is going to land?
Betting we're in Blessed by the Omnissiah if I had to go with it. I think it might even probably land above Chaos Space Marines. I think it is going to be actually a very good, just having a lot of those fast melee options with good rapid ingresses. Anything like that is going to go well into Eldar, and that is one of the things everybody is still afraid of. So I think it has to go, at least for now, at the top of Blessed by the Omnissiah.
Yeah, I would agree. It's going to take a minute because you have 4 different Chaos factions and the Chaos Space Marines, and the amount of time it's going to take to list build an effective list and get to what actually is going to be the good thing there, I think is going to take a lot of players a minute and a lot of play testing. And I don't think it's going to happen soon. I think the easy solutions are there, right? The Bloodthirster with the enhancement. I think we're going to see that almost immediately. But it's like, how many Chaos Space Marines are you going to take? Are you going to take Nurglings? Because they kind of got nerfed, but they also got better, right? The aura is now down to engagement range, but they benefit from the -1 to wound. And that is still very tough to chew through, right? So there is still a lot of value in that detachment and a lot of mobility in it. So in terms of tools, I think it's got a lot. I would put it above Chaos Space Marines. I think it's going to be very, very tight, but I think it's better, honestly.
All right, going back to some Imperial factions, we have Dark Angels. Didn't really see any changes. If I remember correctly, they didn't see any points changes or rules changes. They are still just kind of chilling. I feel like they are mid to low right now. Phil, where are they going to end up?
Yeah, I mean, Deathwing Terminators are still Deathwing Terminators. They're still good. Lion's okay. He does the things that you want him to do. The army as a whole is Space Marines. It gets Oath, but just run Ultramarines. It's just better. Like, the characters are better. The abilities are better. Like, everything is just better. So I'd have a hard time putting it anywhere above High World Scrap. It's probably above Thousand Suns because it is just better Space Marines. The Thousand Suns aren't there, but man, I could probably go either way.
Come on. They're not, okay. They're, for sure, I agree with you that they're mid to low tier, but I think if someone showed up with 3x5 Deathwing Knights, Azrael, a bunch of Inner Circle Companions, I think they could do well at a tournament, but I would agree that it's not going to be a popular list per se. And, how we're ranking the tier list, I don't think it ranks super highly. But, yeah, to your point, at the end of the day, like, it's just not the best. The best Marine faction out there, and therefore won't see as much play because there's one that's way better.
So Big Mech Gubbins is going to be our first one in?
Big Mech Gubbins, I think so.
Yeah, if you believe enough in it, the Big Mech will bless this faction just enough. You can do it, and it will be easier than it is with T-Suns. I think that's totally fair. It hasn't seen any shakeup really since July. It's kind of just been the same thing. So moving along, we are going into Death Guard. Death Guard, I feel like, has some good play. Being able to mess with toughness, ballistic skill, it's going to really mess with orcs if you can get them in range. I think it's definitely going to be up there. The question is how high. I feel like we're probably floating between blessed and touched. It sounds like my childhood. Sorry, folks, we don't need to go back to that. But that is where they are sitting in my mind. Would you guys agree?
I'm biased. I think they're blessed by the Omnissiah. I run them. They're one of my favorite factions, right? They're sitting all up there staring at me because I'm about to pull out Custodes and leave them on the shelf. But they have so many tools to deal with so many different things. And I think they're just so effective across the board. Now, they do struggle with all the same things that normal power armored Space Marines struggle with. But they're really good. They're really good. I like them a lot. But I am biased towards them, so yeah, take my opinion with a grain of salt.
All right.
So I will just play devil's advocate here. I think a couple of the armies that we'll see at the top of the meta, right? So the new Orc Detachment and Eldar, they do kind of the biggest weakness for Death Guard and the biggest strengths of those armies, in my opinion, are around speed. So I do think that the lack of mobility might be an issue, pushing them over the edge to win tournaments. Because those other armies just kind of dance around them with access to advanced and shoot in orcs, with how fast Eldar move. But I totally agree that, in any given meta, Death Guard has the tools to create a list that can potentially win tournaments. But to get them past let's say, the top 3 boogeymen, you can include, Ultramarines in there. I think it might be a little tough, just with who's currently sitting at the top.
Yeah,
I think that is a fair assessment when it comes to the top of the board that we are going to be looking at. However, I think they still fit right in the Omnissiah. They just have good enough matchups into so many other things that I think, looking at some of these other things that are right next to them, even the Chaos Demons trying to run in and be good at combat, the Chaos Space Marines that are right next to them, they're gonna deal very well with a lot of the other things that are still gonna be seen a lot. And while they might struggle with the very top of the meta, everything else is as well. So I think them still sitting right there and blessed by the Omnissiah is probably where I would vote to put them as well. Yep. Awesome. All right. We have at least agreed to disagree, if nothing else. Moving on to Drukhari. Got a couple points drops. Other than that, unchanged. Unless you're Scary, they haven't been really blowing anybody away as Drukhari, if you're running Ynnari and using these same models.
Yeah, does Ynnari count for this?
No, it does not.
Because if Ynnari can't, then it's drastically different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And we're gonna just not see those top players. I mean, maybe Scary still rocks it and doesn't run it, but in general, the average players aren't gonna be running this to X and O or X and 1 very frequently. I would say probably looking at Hive World Scrap. They still have some good tools. They still have a lot of good MSU to deal with stuff.
I mean, yeah, Phil, I mean, I don't want to, crap on my boy Nick's Drukhari like that, but even Nick isn't playing Drukhari right now. So if Nick's not playing Drukhari and bringing it to tournaments, and all those players are all playing Inari, then how is it going to win a GT? You know? So I would tend to agree. What do you think, Phil?
It hurts me a little bit because I just think it's such a cool army and it does so many cool things, but it's going to struggle now. It's going to struggle now more than ever. And it's going to take a very skilled pilot like Skari, like Nick, to run effectively in this meta to a GT win.
Shout out to Skari, the only reason this isn't a war painted junk.
No, man. Yeah. If Yunari just didn't do it better, right? That's the biggest deal. Anybody?
Yeah, 100%.
There's just no reason to take it if you're a great player and you have those models. Just run Yunari. Grey Knights up next. They also didn't really see many changes. There was some changes to their indirect that they had from the Grotness detachment and a points drop to the interceptors. But other than that, not much love. They haven't really been a meta menace, and I don't think that changes much. I think they're still sitting somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I like them a lot. I think they have tools. I like armies that have mobility. I like armies that have great shooting. And honestly, like even squads of purifiers and stuff like that, and the Nemesis Dread Knights, they're good. They're really, really good. Especially that Grotness detachment I value very highly. I definitely value lethality over everything because you can't win the game if I just kill you, right? Like you can't participate if I'm just killing your units and picking them up. I definitely think it's above Dark Angels. I think it doesn't probably score as well as Blood Angels and Chaos Knights. I think those are some pretty tough matchups for them, and overall throughout a tournament weekend would struggle, but I still think there's some serious value there. I think it's probably above Dark Angels. It's probably that big mech Gubbins, or maybe bottom of Touched by a Tech Priest, right in there.
Yep. Yeah. Totally fair. John, any reasons you think it would maybe be above the top of Big Mech Gubbins?
I would say I don't have like a strong feeling either way. I think just to what Phil said, maybe I think it goes to the bottom of Touched by a Tech Priest strictly because of the ability to, the lethality that it has, the ability to do damage, the flamers all over the place. That's a high premium in this meta today. So I think, having full rerolls is just really strong. And they do, ignores cover on all the big guns. So I think that they're, pretty solid faction to make a run at the tournament these days.
All right. Yeah, I'm fine with that. As long as we're on board, we'll keep it trucking. Imperial Knights, they have been getting quite a few wins as of late and only saw some points drops to some of their less picked big knights. I think they're probably going to be somewhere in that Blessed by the Omnissiah or Touched by a Tech Priest as well, sitting right there by the other knights maybe even.
John, I've been taking each one first.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm biased. I hate knights. I don't know if anyone knows this. Really don't like it. Mostly because of my personal experience playing Tau. I typically lose games in the knights because it's a bad matchup. But I think, I think it's fair to put them in a similar range as Chaos Knights. Again, they're a nice durability skew. Now, I will say that, the people that you see winning with Knights is, Brian Jones, who's like the premier Knights player in the country. I don't envision them going out and winning a bunch of GTs left and right. I think that that was kind of a flash in the pan, but they still have a place in the meta. Toughness skews can just dodge bad matchups and go on to win a GT. But that's kind of my thought process. Is they're very similar to Chaos Knights. It's another durability skew that has the potential to get through the meta. But with things like the new Orcs existing, I think it's kind of an existential threat to their existence because +1 to wound is just really good into those big knights. And, differently than Chaos Knights, Knights does like to bring their big boys.
Yeah, I think sliding them in right below Chaos Knights is where I would maybe put them. Phil, any other thoughts on that?
The only thing that I think they do have an advantage over Chaos Knights is with the addition of them starting to take sisters now as allies and being able to strip cover with those immolators, I think provides a lot of value for that detachment as a whole. So I actually think they're slightly above Chaos Knights just because of that. Like being able to strip cover is such a huge part of the game now. I think it provides a lot of value. Yes, Chaos Knights have the demon pieces, right? You have Nurglings, you have other scoring units and stuff like that, but there is something to say, and I'm a firm believer that if your army has access to stripping cover, you probably should try to find a way to fit it in there, whether it be a stratagem or a unit or something like that. And Imperial Knights really benefits from it, so I probably would have them just above Chaos Knights.
I guess yeah. Let's go ahead and bump them up. Obviously, their recent track record is much more glowing than Chaos Knights anyway. So let's bump them on up and move right along. Up next is Astra Militarum, Warp Tainted Junk. Who the hell plays this shit? No reason to take them. Bridgehead is dead. We can just move on, right? No, I think.
Come on, Lane. Yeah, give us the overview. I'm excited for this one.
I really think Guard is actually in an okay spot. They are probably, I would still put them probably around lower end of Touched by a Tech Priest, at least mid to lower of Touched by a Tech Priest. I think they still deal with some of these things decently well. Just having a lot of decent ranged weapons and blast keywords, 3 damage weapons, especially into like the Custodes matchup. When Marines are strong, they are good. There's just, I think, a lot of different ways you can go about building Guard. And I think right now the Bridgehead is dead, Combined Arms, a Hammer of the Emperor, and maybe Mechanized or Siege will see some play as well. And I think they are still fully capable of it. You might need, depending on what flavor you're running, to get a good win path to do so. But I think they're in that same range of being able to handle enough of what else is good. We also have tons of cheap trash, and that always helps. So yeah, I think Touched by a Tech Priest, somewhere around the Knights, I think is probably where I would put them as well.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think, cheap dudes in transports is really good thing in the meta right now, to Phil's earlier point about Orcs, I believe. That might have been on a different episode. But the fact that the Torarks didn't go up, the fact that the Rogaldorn Commander didn't go up, I think it's 2 really big positives for Guard, and I think if you lean into those types of data sheets, more infantry, more Toraxes, I think they can absolutely go at it to win GTs. And I think, I think Bridgehead overshadowed some of the other builds in the Guard arsenal. I'm excited to see what you come up with, Lane.
Oh yeah, haven't changed a bit. We went from Combined Regiment to Combined Arms. It just remained. You can't drop lethals. They just
it's
do
nice.
the thing.
All right, we'll put them in Touched by a Tech Priest for now.
To my own faction's horn, I guess you would say. Okay, all right, that's fair. It's fine. I'll forgive you later. Necrons up next. They didn't really see much for buffs in this detachment or in this data slate. I don't know. I feel like after Star Shattered died in January, they really haven't been coming up a lot on like MetaWatch Mondays and stuff. I still can definitely do it, but I just feel like it's a little uninspired now. John, any thoughts on Necrons?
Yeah, I do think there's one strong build with Hypercrypt. Run a unit of Wraiths with the 5 of Field of Pain, couple Doom Sets, Silent King, and just bounce around the table, blowing stuff up. I think that's strong. But to your point, I don't think that a ton of players are gravitating toward it as much. And also, Star Shatter is definitely not as strong as people, with the buffs and the changes they made to the stratagems, making them 2 CP, some changes to the enhancements. I think, it's definitely not as strong as it used to be, but I still think it can win tournaments. But I probably would land somewhere between Big Mech Gubbins and Hive World Scrap personally. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah. So I still have memories of like when this detachment first came out, and it seems like a while ago, but it wasn't, right? It was, just a couple months ago, and we got to experience all of that. Necrons are interesting because they do have good tools. The Resurrection is a great ability that can really mess with certain armies, right? In terms of multiple layered activations. I like them as a whole. I think they have good shooting. They have access to decent combat. If I were to play them, it'd probably be in Hypercrypt because I do like that extra mobility. And I'd probably put them above Dark Angels. I don't think they necessarily do well into all parts of the meta. Believe it or not, I think Guard is probably better overall, just in terms of the tools and primary and secondary scoring and what it can do over a 6-round tournament. It's probably right there, but man, it has definitely not been on my radar since Star Shatter kind of went in the tubes, and I'm actually pretty thankful for that. I don't like seeing Catans. I don't like seeing the Silent King. They are big, scary dudes that don't die, and I like my stuff that my opponent has when it dies. So I definitely put it above Dark Angels, but probably right there.
Yeah, I think that is totally fair. Sitting at the top of Big Mech Gubbins sounds like a great spot. And we will move on to Adeptus Sororitas. The sisters did see a little love. Their army rule did get reinstated, at least the part about every time a unit of yours dies and not just limited to once per phase. Gonna have more dice to play with now. Is that going to be enough to vault them from kind of the warp-tainted junk they were at to anything higher than Hive World Scrap or Big Mech Gubbins? What do you guys think?
I'd say it definitely helps. I think kind of, again, with, like, when we look at something like Drukhari, Thousand Suns, I feel like they have a lot of predators in the meta, a lot of things that can kill sisters. People are skewing into bodies more, in my opinion. I think sisters has a pretty hard time with that. They prefer to see the Catans of the world, the Knights, but I don't think above that level they can kind of handle the CSMs, Death Guards, Chaos Demons, Custodes of the world. So, yeah, but I'm curious what you think, Phil, like with the new changes. Is that, how big of a buff was it? Did it help them get out of the sub 45% that they were at?
I genuinely think it does. I think their Grotmist detachment, which desperately needs more miracle dice, like it needed more to actually be effective, I think is good. I think small units of Sacrosancts are solid. They've gotten another points drop. You have the miracle dice back. That detachment buffs them anyways. Like you aren't tied to taking as many sister squads as you'd be forced to be taking in some of these other detachments. I do think there's some value there. The problem is, I think that list is probably going to be one-dimensional. It's going to be one thing, and that's going to be it. So I do think they're out of warp-tainted junk. I don't think they're better than Drukhari. Just in terms of capabilities, if we talk about like what is actually capable, I think Drukhari, even though they're at the bottom of this tier list, right? I know they are capable of going 6-0 and 5-1 because I see it from guys like Cody, from guys like Nick, from guys like Scary, and we got 2 of them in the Colorado area that I see consistently. So I know it's doable. I just think Sisters is definitely behind the 8 ball compared to those 2.
Yeah, I think it'll fit right in that slot, and hopefully we do see some people just do the thing, make it all the way, and go to 6-0 with some sisters, and we can all be so stoked for them and happy that they did so. But what we're definitely going to see is some people running some Space Marines to 6-0, and there's no question about it. It's just how frequently are we going to see that? Man, I'm feeling like it's going to probably be in Blessed by the Omnissiah. I don't think it's quite enough to be Mastercrafted. Phil, why don't you take the lead on this one? Where do you think they are sitting?
Yeah, so there's nothing new coming out right now, and they did take a slight hit. So for Vanguard specifically, Uriel not being able to give Centurions Deep Strike is huge. That was the fundamental piece of that army that made them so effective. Now, talking to Roddy, talking to Ben Neal, like you hear that there are other tools that they're looking at and going after, but that detachment as a whole has definitely probably lost some effectiveness. Or it's just opened up the fact that we need to do a little bit better list building and we can explore some other options, and we'll see where they're at. Now, they have been such a dominant part of the meta. Everyone has teched into them. You know you're going to see Ironstorm. You know you're going to see Gladius. You know you're going to see Vanguard at some point. So you are teched and prepared to deal with those things. And not by any faults of their own, but that has definitely caused them to be affected in terms of how efficiently they have been winning tournaments. So I definitely think they're top of Blessed by the Omnissiah until proven otherwise, right? Like this new rash of meta menaces, we'll see where they knock them down to, but they have good tools. Ironstorm is still scary. Marnius is still incredible. Old Gilliman, he is still awesome. +1 to wound is fantastic on 2 targets. You have nothing to complain about there, right? The detachment and army as a whole is really good. But It's been a menace for so long. Has it worn out its welcome? Has it dropped just because of the fact that it's been good for so long?
Yeah, I don't have much to add there. I think you're right on the money. I don't think there's any reason to bring them outside of being at the top of Blessed by the Omnissiah. I imagine we still see them a lot towards the top of the meta for all those, and winning tournaments for all those reasons you listed.
Yeah, definitely doing well. Until +1 to wound goes away for Codex Space Marines, I don't think we're going to see them drop much below Blessed by the Omnissiah.
We can only pray.
Yes, we must pray. But in other more, what do you call these, divergent chapters, like Space Wolves, things aren't looking so good. Not so good. I think it's very hard to put Space Wolves remotely near the top right now. And are they probably, do they go above or below Black Templars? I guess that is my big question.
Man, I don't know. That is a good question. I think that the what's the one detachment? Champions of Russ. I think Champions of Russ actually is pretty solid. They have a lot of good tools there. They can give like the whole army access to advance and charge, potentially getting Field of Pain. So I think it's a decent melee army. I think it does have the edge on Black Templars personally. But I kind of am sipping the haterade a little bit. I'm just so glad. Probably my least favorite stat check of all time was -1 to hit, -1 to wound, and Thunder Cab with 2 reactive moves. Please, never again.
Yeah, it is dead, and we are glad. Phil, where are you placing the Space Wolves right now?
Yeah, it's above Black Templars, right? Thundercab is still a thing, and it's still like something that people will do. The problem is you go up into Ironstorm, and Ironstorm just picks up full squads of Thunderwolf Cav and doesn't even blink while it does it, right? Like they're even Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, they will just pick up Thunderwolf Cav, no issues. So it struggles, right, as a whole, and it is not as good of Space Marines as other Space Marines are. So as a whole, the detachment, that was my first model I remember painting was Space Marines. It was Logan Grimnar. Like I painted him first. It was my first ever faction, and I loved him so, but I will side with John on this and say I don't like being thunder jailed. It is not fun. I don't want to do it ever again. So they can stay at the bottom for a little bit. They can pay for their sins, and eventually we will let them back up. But right now, they're probably above Black Templar, but they are definitely in Warp-Tainted Junk.
In Warp-Tainted Junk. All right,
Yeah.
So they stay above Black Templars, not enough to be out of the Warp-Tainted Junk. All right, I like it. Hot take. Let's keep on rolling. Tau Empire. All right, Phil, this is your faction, right? All you've ever known. I'm just kidding. John, where are we at here?
Yeah, so I think Tau Empire fits in Big Mech Gubbins, personally. Big Mech Gubbins. Now, I think that Tau is currently kind of at the lower power level side of the meta. However, there are some builds that we can come up with that can give a lot of the top of the meta a good run for their money. But in order to achieve X and 1, X and O, I do think that there is a portion of doing that is avoiding bad matchups, of which Tau has a few. So I think anything higher than Big Mech Gubbins would just be hopeful of me. I think right now, where things stand in the meta, as far as some of the other players in the game, I think we would struggle into a pretty decent amount of them. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have John and Matt, two of the best Tau players in the country that I play against, I would say, more than I'm comfortable with, right? Like, they are incredible players. They are constantly challenging the detachments. They do great things on the board in terms of how they execute their game plans. So I almost, when I see Tau, I immediately, flash back to the last time John and I played and how tight that game was. Matt and I's games were always tight, right? So I like an army with tools. Tau has tools. Tau has lethality.
What do you think, Lane?
Yeah, I think you are both exactly right. I think right in the Big Mech Gubbins is right where they should be. They definitely can go the distance. It's going to take some favorable matchups, especially with some of the fast melee I think we're going to see. I think that is going to be one of the major struggles, as we've talked about in that video where we break down the new detachment. Yeah, I think definitely can, just going to take some luck. Yeah, I think right where it should be. Moving along, we have Tyranids. The big bugs themselves, man, they didn't see really any changes. I don't think they saw any changes as far as rules were concerned, just some price swaps on some units. They haven't been really running away with anything lately. I think we're probably going to see them, I would assume, in, Hive fleet scrap, maybe, for this one, we call it.
I would actually... Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Tyranids just, I think by nature of the detachments we have access to, like, I think Vanguard is really good right now on, like, the 30 Gene Stealer build. They've got a lot of tools in that. I think they generically have good data sheets in, like, Lictors. The Hive Tyrant went down somehow. He's insane. And I think that their army rule is, a great comeback mechanic to give them some consistency into games they might not, like, they probably shouldn't win. It can be an auto win mechanic if it swings one turn of primary.
They do have the
All right,
ability
so
to
within
skew as
Big
well.
Gubbins,
No, I think they're above that. I think they're touched by a Tech Priest. I think with the skew that they
I would agree.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. I think with the
All
skew
right.
that they have, with Malceptors, with Hive Tyrants, with what's the giant queen?
The Norn?
Yeah, the Norn. Like, even that, I think I've seen it. It has play. And those big bugs and that skew, I think is probably either right above. Don't get angry, Lane, but I think it's actually right above Astra Militarum, or maybe above Grey Knights.
Hey.
Right? I think it has the capabilities to beat those both consistently.
For what it's worth, Lane,
Maybe.
I think guard should be higher. I think guard should be above Insights for the record, because I think dudes in boxes is good. So
Yeah.
go see dumping.
Well,
So
and
if
it's
we
fine.
said-
I don't know.
Much better.
But it looks better.
Well, now we got a discrepancy because Phil thinks they're better than guard, but you think guard's better than the knights. All I cared about was making a high fleet joke, so just to be controversial here. But I think I definitely can see why they are strong, just to reiterate that. I do think as far as guard goes, I think we are really picking at hairs with a lot of the stuff in Touched by a Tech Priest. It's going to depend a lot on what builds people are running, especially in guard, because that is really going to make such a difference in a lot of these matchups. So it is just so nebulous that it really doesn't matter to me at the end of the day. I know where I would put myself against some of those matchups because of what I run specifically, but again, it's above and below some of them. But I'm not going to tell you which, so fuck off. But moving along, not to digress on guard anymore, as much as we could, Leagues of Votan. They saw basically just a tweak to their detachment and army role to help spread the love to their other detachment. They really didn't change a ton, but how do you feel like the changes to the meta have affected them? Because I think that's going to be a larger factor for where they sit on the tier list.
The meta coming down around them is good. It is the way I would prefer things to be balanced. I would much rather have a less lethal game. I remember 8th and 9th where it was just like so much lethality and games were done in 1 or 2 turns that was not enjoyable. So I definitely appreciate things coming down. I don't think Votan has come up, and also I think they only really have one build, and it's taking a bunch of vehicles, 2 HLFs, and just saying, I'm gonna scout onto these objectives. You're gonna pop them. My guys are gonna come out. I'm gonna hopefully continually score primaries, and then at the end of the game, hopefully I win. I wish they had more because they have cool units. I think the bikes are awesome with their mobility, but it feels bad, but it's probably right at Sisters level, maybe above it. They do have guys in transports, which, as John was saying, we've talked about before, it is good. And Sisters they have that, but not to the level that Leagues of Votan do, because Leagues of Votan's ones could scout a lot more efficiently than the Sisters ones can. They can a little bit, but the Votan ones are probably just better. I don't know. It feels, once again, like splitting hairs there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think, Votan does have like a linear play style, which kind of hurts them a bit. They have like a game plan, and if you know what that is, you can counter it pretty well. So I would agree. I think it's somewhere in Hive World scrap, but where that lands, I think it is splitting hairs. What do you think, Lane?
Just not that hair. No, a different one. Okay, that works. Yeah, no, I think that's right on the money. Somewhere in there, they just have a very set play style, as you were saying. They don't really catch anybody off guard with any tricks. If they spike on their casino cannons, great. They do tend to do a little bit better into a lot of those like knight type super elite or big armies, just because they can double judge and really deal with them effectively. The amount of more like MSUE type armies that we are going to see, I think in fast melee, I think are going to be tougher for them to deal with. So yeah, I think just sitting in Hive World Scrap is right where they should be. And I don't know if we're going to have to look far when it comes to World Eaters, because I feel like they are around there, maybe a little higher. But that's just my feeling. They still don't have a ton of tricks themselves.
Yeah, so I have an identical twin brother. He plays World Eaters. We face off, quite a bit, and we always have close games. So I figure we're probably in somewhere in the Big Mech Gubbins world or Hive World Scrap. I think there are a few really good matchups up at the top for World Eaters. One of them is Eldar. It absolutely runs over Yannari. Now, I will say some of the armies that were brought down actually kind of hurt them in a way because, for example, like Slanesh Demons had a terrible matchup into World Eaters, but because Slanesh Demons had a good matchup into shooting armies, it almost made it so that Slanesh Demons was countering the meta that would typically kill World Eaters, and so I know we're getting a little deep into this, but being the counter to the counter is not the worst spot in the world to be. I mean, that's exactly what World Eaters was at the time. So we'll see what happens with their codex, but I would say it probably is somewhere in the Big Mech Gubbins range. Angron could come back. Advanced Charge is generically really good on super fast units, so I think it's.
Yeah, I mean, I already said that it wouldn't be an army that I would put out on the board, but Advanced Charge is good, as John is saying, and overall, it is lethal. Like, if it touches you, those Exalted 8-bound will kill pretty much anything. Angron will kill pretty much anything. So if they're able to put pressure on you, which, I've played into World Leaders quite a few times because they are popular in and around our meta. We do have quite a few players that will use them. If they're able to pressure you turn one, which they're fully capable of doing, and keep you inside your deployment zone or really prevent you from scoring early on, it can be very difficult to deal with overall. So I value that quite high. Just the problem is when you're a one-dimensional army, you can be taken advantage of in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think definitely some good matchups, some bad matchups, and it's just going to be the luck of the pairings for you to take World Eaters the distance. Definitely some inherent strength, just still a lot of weaknesses, so they don't quite make it to the top half of the board. Moving into the newest of the armies as a whole, the Year of Chaos is upon us. Emperor's Children are here on Saturday. They are going to get their release, and we are also going to have a full review of that with Frankie and Matt. They are going to come back on, and we will go all over that as well. So we're going to plug that right here, make sure everybody knows to come back and watch that. But where are they going to be on this tier list? We've done a little bit of research into what's coming. How do you guys feel about the newest boys on the block, Emperor's Children?
Yeah, good. Just good. Like, they're a good army. They have good combat. They have good EC shooting. They don't necessarily have access to all the things that I would prefer them to have access to. It's just a solid army. I don't necessarily think it's much above that, which I like, actually. Like, a detachment coming out, the rules feel well thought out, the detachments feel okay, nothing feels incredibly broken. Yeah, I think it's just solid. It's probably in that Touched by a Tech Priest tier. I don't know if it has the capabilities to deal with some of the meta menaces out there, but I do think it's probably above Grey Knights. It is mobile. It does have good movement. And it is great into elite units and armies.
Yeah, I think it's really solid. Like, obviously, the Emperor Children rule is very good. They do pretty decent damage. They have a good shooting piece, which is really important for a fast-moving melee army like that. But they do have a glaring weakness, I would say, which is their durability. Now, you can play around that by just hitting your opponent in the face, which a lot of them can do. But some of the damage can be a little bit anemic. Outside of the characters, Fulgrim isn't super, awesome. I think it's just a solid army with solid rules, but, also has some weaknesses as well.
Yeah, Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty good. I think, as you guys were both saying, some definitely very good matchups and some they struggle with. But yeah, I think Touched by Tech Priest looks great. Ooh, man, that looks like some spicy ass armies we have left to cover. I wonder where they are going. Orcs. Have people been talking about orcs much, or is that a pretty hyped army right now? I mean, Tactical Brigade is dead, right? Like they've got to be just, I mean, big mech gubbins, right? They're orcs. At best.
Obsolete.
Yeah,
So don't
definitely
take them.
not
Don't bring them
Mastercraft.
to RMO. If you're watching this, deciding what you want to play, definitely don't take orcs. Don't even look at the new detachment, actually. Don't even bother. It's not good. Just play something else.
Yeah. Real friends don't let friends do DACA, all right? And this is so true. Do not let your friends do DACA or more DACA. It's just not right. Because it's going to make all of their friends not want to play them anymore. They are disgusting. Oh my God. Or even ludicrous, as we have been saying. Throw some more bad puns in just for the memes. Yeah, they are pretty spicy. John, how would you feel about going up against some more DACA orcs coming up this next weekend?
Really not great. I think it's almost, when I think about my list and putting together a tile list that beats the orc matchup in this more DACA detachment specifically, it's almost like I'm trying to solve an impossible problem. They're extremely strong. I think, in the next few weeks here, there's going to be a significant spike in GP wins, specifically from orcs. They just have a lot of good shooting, generically good shooting platforms that are definitely undercosted at the moment. Flash Gits, Saludas, Tank Bustas. They just have a really great shooting backline, and adding Sustain 2 to that is just going to push them over the edge. In addition to having a bunch of great stratagems and rule sets. If you watch the Tau detachment overview of the new detachment, you'll hear me make the joke that this detachment must have been written by the same guy who wrote Star Shatter, because the rules are absolutely bananas. Like, they are off the charts. So yeah, absolutely straight to the top. It's definitely the best detachment in the game. No questions asked.
Phil, any other salt you want to throw on here?
You don't think it is?
I think it is. I think so. We'll
What's
do
the
it
best
next.
detachment in the game?
Yeah, so we'll do it next because it's the next one coming up. I think devoted to Iniad, going into Orcs, that is an awful matchup for Orcs. I think it's really bad because you're turning off their Overwatch multiple times. You are moving at the end of the shooting phase, and you have a fights first brick that is almost uninteractable for a unit that does have good combat, but that incubi brick will just pick everything up. Overall, I do think with the mobility that Iniad has, I don't know how they lose that matchup, because they want you to shoot at them, and they're only giving you targets that they want to die, because otherwise they're just doing lethal intent at the end of your shooting phase. Great, that's fine for them. I don't think it's very close, if I'm honest. Like, I think one hard counters the other. I think Iniad is just a menace. The Incarn is going to go into like those toughness 5 bodies and just rip them up. Overall, it is, yeah, I just think playing into it is so good.
Now, okay, super fair, but I guess my one counter to that would be, I think Yunari has more hard counters than Orcs do. Like, I think Devoted of Iniad is the one hard counter to Orcs, but melee pressure in general, which there are significantly more variants of, is also a hard counter to Yunari. So, as far as winning GTs is concerned, I don't think it's going to have like a meaningful difference in the numbers, to be honest with you. But yeah, we're definitely in the splitting hairs part of the podcast. That's for sure. What do you think, Wayne? What is your unbiased opinion?
I'm gonna split them, and I think I'm actually gonna side with John on this one. I agree with Phil 100%, but I also agree with you. I think if Orcs run into Yunari, they will probably lose that matchup. However, in the scope of this tier list, we have been trying to maintain what has the highest chance to make go the distance. And I feel like Orcs does have fewer things that are going to be a natural predator or something that is going to be harder for them to deal with. And yeah, I think Yunari still has enough, a couple more, I think, that are just not quite as great for them. That yeah, I think Orcs still just bump them out by just a hair.
Okay.
Yep, I feel good with it. Yep, had to sit with it for a second, It's up there. Yep, no turning back now. Moving along, Gene Stealer Colts. Probably some final day runners if Phil was to predict what would be probably winning some GTs. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Final Day and Host of Ascension. I don't think the other detachments are good enough. Biosanctic is not there. Ascension Day is not there. It's just between those two. Brood Brothers is non-existent. But Host of Ascension is still very, very good. I like Final Day. I like running Gargoyles. I think it is oppressive for some armies. I think it does so well into so many forms of the matchup. And the most important thing, like, if you look at this list and you're asking yourself, like, why is mine on the bottom? I can kill Gene Stealer Cult, fine. It's like, probably, there's very few armies that don't struggle to kill GSC, but there are very few armies that score as well as GSC. And even in bad matchups, even where things are tougher, or bad missions, or whatever the case is, Gene Stealer Cult has the tools to find the ways to get the win, right? Whether it be denying primary, whether it be deep striking behind, whether it just be continued pressure. Like, it has so many tools to do those things. Now, the interesting thing is, I do think it's above Ultramarines. I think it's better, but it's not. It is splitting hairs. I would be okay with putting it right below it. And then if I look at some of the other things that are up there, it definitely struggles into demons, right? That those toughness 12 bodies are now toughness 13 on a great unclean one. If you don't have access to a lot of reroll hits or sustained or lethals, your army can definitely struggle. But that is where the scoring aspect comes into play, where a good pilot is going to find those scoring opportunities in every game. And Jesus Call has the tools for that.
Yeah, I think that's right on the money. Where are you leaning, John, as far as the final placement of GSC? You feeling above Space Marines, below? Where do you think they're sitting?
I would say I have a bias as Tau. I would lean on Phil here to kind of make the final call on like where, between Ultramarines, Orcs, Eldar, Custodes, what those matchups look like for him. But I think GSC is really strong generically. I think that, being able to get 300 points of your army back without, just from dying is very good. And I was honestly surprised that they didn't get touched at all, really, in the latest update. I really thought there would be like maybe a reduction to, or an increase in the amount of tokens it costs for specific units, specifically the Flamer Acolytes, which I think are definitely undercosted. For the record, Phil.
Yeah,
when you see 5, 6 of one unit in an army, that's how you know they probably should go up a little bit. And also, when you think about, so a lot of these missions are running things like raised banners, it just makes the scoring go absolutely through the roof without even trying. For an army that already scores really well. So, yeah, GSC very strong right now. But, again, Phil, I lean on you where they land.
I think they're behind Custodes. I think Custodes are just ahead of them, especially this new detachment, but they are solid. They have every tool that I could ask for. Final Day is really good. They have a lot of value, and I think, unfortunately, I think this happens often. Not enough people play them, so then on these 6-round tournaments, you play GSC Final Day for the first time, and at the end of the game, you're like, oh, shit, I did not expect that out of Final Day, right? I didn't expect the lethality, or for Host of Ascension, how mobile they are, bringing back those 20-man bricks of neophytes, which we'll see how many people are going to run after the points changes to them, but it is still really good.
Yeah. I did forget there was that one point change. How much was it for the 20-man? 10, 15?
15, I think. 15 for a 20-man.
15.
Yeah. All right. Last but not least, they just got their own rules back in December. It is Death Watch, and just more proof that there's my suspicion that Phil is nothing but a meta chaser. They are going to be right at the top as well. And he has just started collecting them recently. So, Phil, explain yourself.
I tried buying it yet, and I got shunned by my gaming group who said, if you go out and buy this, you are not allowed to bring it to the club. And I said, fair. So then I had Space Marines already all built up, and I was like, I'm actually pretty close to a reasonably competitive Death Watch list. And I love Terminators. They're my pet unit. If there's one unit I want to run, it's definitely Terminators, and whether it be Blightlord Terminators or Deathshroud Terminators or Primaris Terminators, I just like Terminators. So that army actually, I think, has tools into the top of the meta. The main one is you can give them precision, the army-wide precision in shooting on crits. So on 6s, you would get precision into that, which I think is super important into armies like Iliad, where they have these really important characters that if you can pick them out before you charge in there, especially with these big bricks of kill teams, like that would be huge. If you can kill the fight first before you charge in there, that would be incredible, right? And I think they have the tools to deal with a lot of this stuff. The only thing that they don't necessarily have access to is indirect, which isn't the end of the world. And they are one of the few things that will pick up full squads of Ludas, even at toughness 5. Like an Indominus kill team will pick up a full squad of Ludas, no problem. And they are tough-ish bodies. Like they are toughness 6 for the majority of kill teams that people are running competitively. So I do value them quite highly. I think they have the tools. A Drukhari with Thief of Secrets is still scary. Like the mobility is awesome. I think they have every bit of what it takes to be competitive.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, like Deathwatch is just generically good. Uppy Downy is just an awesome rule to have, especially on those kill teams. And having the combination of good melee where you can just run straight at your opponent when you need to is really awesome tool to have in the toolkit. So I would agree. I think it goes straight into Mastercrafted. In terms of like the number of GTs they're going to win, it probably won't be super high because of the size of the player population and how hard it is to collect the army. But like percentage-wise of that population and how well they're doing, I think is what puts them up there for me.
Yeah. I think Phil nailed it, especially with the precision into so many of these armies and just the flexibility of their other options even. They really are just going to be able to handle a lot of what just gets put in front of them while also being tough enough to deal with. Mastercrafted 100%, and just another one of Phil's armies just sliding up to the top. So, yeah, lucky you, Phil.
I totally understand the hatred there, Lane. I could hear it in your voice. But this is, I think, something to show. So, like, my Custodes and Death Guard and a GSC I've had for a long time, and they've gone through highs and lows of, like, being successful and then sitting on the shelf and being not touched, right? Because that's what happens, right? They go through highs and lows of just being effective and honestly fun to play with, and then you want to swap to something else, and that's one of the great things about 40k. Like, it is cyclical. It will all come back around. Armies will be good again, and then they will be bad again, and they will be good again.
Yeah, 100%. So just more reason, go ahead and start collecting that second army. Just something for you to maybe have in the back pocket if you're ever feeling like you need a change. Sometimes you might be, sitting there with 2 warp-tainted junk armies. Other times you might have 2 Mastercrafteds. You just never know. So yeah, buy more Warhammer. What could go wrong? Finances don't matter. This is what matters. The game of 40K. Yeah. Anything you guys feel like we need to move around? I think we all feel pretty comfortable with where everything ended up. There's some really strong armies out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm really curious how things are going to land after the balanced data slate. I mean, this is kind of a prediction episode along with the tier list. I'm very curious how things will shake out at RMO. And I imagine we'll see a lot of these armies at the top. And I will say, my pick to click for RMO is Michael Mann and the DACA Brigade. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but the DACA detachment. I think Michael Mann is going to take that and absolutely run with it. But I don't think he's going to have very many close games. I'll tell you that much.
I do think Nick has a good chance of winning this. I think RMO, all eyes from, I think, all around the world are going to be watching this tournament because it is going to be the biggest one after this data slate in terms of these lists being legal. And Iliad, as a whole, has tools, and he has not dropped a game with this new detachment, and it is disgusting what it forces like your opponent to do because there's so many options and so many like choices you have to make. I don't see how he loses it, but that game versus Michael Mann, I hope they get to the final table. I hope it's Michael Mann versus Nick because I would love to see how that game turns out because I think it's going to be incredibly tight.
Yeah, well, that would be a great game. Hopefully, if that happens, Joe will get it on stream on War Games Live because that one is definitely going to need some review by us, and it would be great to have the footage. So yeah, that is one thing we can all hope for is a Michael Mann and Nicholas matchup going at the end of RMO, and yeah, man, that'll be a game to watch. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming and sitting here with us as we break down the new balanced data slate and the new meta. what we think is going to be rising to the top and the meta menaces, as Phil does like to say. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. All of that stuff really helps grow the channel. And do not forget, victory is not given, it is forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. So we'll see you next time. Bye.